Comparison of the ancient Egyptian culture to the ancient Inca culture. Final project for Ancient World History class with Patton University by Ann Kempf. The Egyptians were located in Africa and the Inca were located in South America, both on separate continents divided by an ocean. The two cultures seemingly had no contact, yet many of the artifacts that have been discovered have many similarities. The Egyptians and Incas both built structures of stone. The Egyptians built structures with huge stones of a uniform cut and shape, compared to the Inca that used randomly shaped stones. Additionally, the Inca constructed terrace walls and temples using massive pieces of stone, fitting them perfectly together. Both the Inca and the Egyptian structures are built with blocks leaning inward. It's believed this was done to make the structure more stable in the event of an earthquake. Pyramidal structures were common to both cultures. The Egyptian pyramids were used as tombs and constructed to be in alignment with cardinal points. In contrast, the Inca pyramid structures were used to revere the gods, and only a few bodies have been found to be entombed in these pyramids. Additionally, the Inca pyramids are stair-stepped, but the Egyptian pyramid construction consisted of both stair-stepped and smooth-sided. The difference in structures could be attributed to the terrain of the Inca. They dwelled in the upper regions of the Andean mountains. Because they lived on sloping land, they were accustomed to constructing terraces for agriculture. Their stair-stepping design could have naturally been carried into the building. One of the differences in architecture of the two people is the shape of the doorways. The Egyptians seemed to favor rectangular openings, where the Inca doorways tended to be trapezoidal. Both cultures constructed obelisks, which are stone pillars that were often covered in carvings. The obelisks were symbols of masculine strength and fertility, lending toward the phallic shape. The Inca and Egyptians both revered their dead, and mummification was used by both cultures. Both the Inca and Egyptians believed in life after death, so they took measures to preserve the bodies. The Inca would typically bury their bodies in a sitting position with what is known as a mummy bundle. Within the wrappings of cotton, the body would be buried with personal items and religious offerings. Not all Inca mummies were buried. Some were placed in tombs above ground where they were worshipped. Worshipping the mummies of Inca rulers was an important part of the Inca religion. The living could consult with the mummified rulers on important issues. Each of these king mummies still held rights of ownership to all of their property, and they had living servants. Egyptians were much more focused on the mummification process, but it was generally reserved for the bodies of the wealthy. The internal organs, such as the lungs, intestines, stomach, and liver, were treated with great respect. They were removed and placed in vessels called canop jars. The heart was placed back into the body, and then the body was cleansed and covered in salt for 70 days to dry out. At 40 days, the body was covered and stuffed with cloth or sand to help it retain the human shape. At the end of the 70 days, the body was wrapped and placed in a box called a sarcophagus. After the mummification process was complete, the body was adorned with a gold mask, and the neck was draped with a heavy necklace. The sarcophagus was designed with the appearance of a god or the deceased. Like the Inca, the mummies were buried with personal belongings, but the earliest dynasties of Egyptians went even further. They took their slaves and sometimes family members and government officials with them to the afterlife. In recent history, victims of human sacrifices have been discovered in the icy peak of the Andes Mountains. These bodies are basically freeze-dried rather than mummified and were undiscovered for hundreds of years. Because the bodies were left intact, scientists have gained further insight into how sacrificial victims met their demise, as well as the types of clothing they wore and the health of the Inca people. Archaeologists have been uncertain if the Egyptian people performed human sacrifices. However, in 2001, an archaeological dig in Betos, Egypt, uncovered evidence that seemed to confirm human sacrifices did take place in the first or possibly second dynasty. And unlike the Inca, they made sacrifices to appease their gods. There appears to be graves of servants and perhaps even cherished family members and government officials of the deceased ruler Aha. It is speculated that they were poisoned and then buried while still alive, as there is evidence of movement in the grave, but no evidence of physical violence in the bodies, and the graves are located above the tomb of Aha so they can join him in the afterlife. Egyptian homes were generally made of mud mixed with straw that were baked into bricks, as there is no timber in the area and only the wealthy had homes built of stone. Egyptians did have some furniture, but most people sat on the floor. The most common piece of Egyptian furnishings was a low stool and reed baskets used for storage. Inca dwellings were simple structures made of stone and mud with thatched roofs, and they had no furnishings. For the Inca, preserving food facilitated their population growth, and their storehouses are said to have had 3 to 5 years of food such as dried meat and freeze-dried potatoes and other tubers. The potato was the staple food, and they had many different varieties. One of the potatoes was even used as a sweetener. The Inca would also use the sun and wind to preserve their food. A difference between techniques can be attributed to the differing climate. The Egyptian diet was dependent upon social standing. The poor ate unleavened bread, onions, and fish. The upper class had a variety of breads, vegetables, honey, meat, and fruits like date, apricots, and grapes. Like the Inca, the Egyptian stored food. They had silos for grain, and fish, meat, fruits, and vegetables were dried and salted, while the Inca freeze-dried their vegetation. Both Egyptians and the Incas consumed alcohol. The Egyptian drank mostly beer made from barley, and they drank wine, where the Inca primarily drank chichi, a fermented drink derived from maize, which contained alcohol. Each used their climate to the best advantages, and agriculture was important to both cultures. Each had to be creative to successfully grow crops. The Egyptians had to count on heavy rains starting in early July, and the land along the river would flood into late November, and this began the farming season. It was perfect because the floods brought in nutrient-rich soils, but the Egyptians also practiced water management through a technique called basin irrigation. By constructing banks of low-sloping canals, perpendicular and parallel to the river, they created basins for holding water. Flood water from the Nile could be directed into the basin, where it would stay until the soil was amply watered. At that time, the basins could be drained off and the new crops could be planted. For the Inca, rainfall was unreliable, so they devised a system of canals to move water from nearby rivers to the mountain slopes, where they were constructing terraces, slopes, so that the water would not run off, and was able to combat erosion and make farming simpler. Both the Inca and Egyptians had a social stratification, although the Egyptian social structure was sharply divided. Both naturally placed the ruling entity at the top of the power structure, and the peasants and slaves were at the bottom. The gods of the ancient people were connected with nature for both the Inca and Egyptian. Both placed great importance on the sun, each having a solar deity. The Inca sun god was Inti, and the Egyptian solar god was Ra. The sun god was a prevalent theme in the art of both cultures, and the similarity could be explained by their astute awareness of the consistency of the sun and how it affected the seasons. Many ancient cultures looked to nature for answer, and the overwhelming power of the sun must have made it appear to be a supreme entity. The Inca held a rite of passage for males when they turned 14 to honor the transition from boyhood to adulthood. The ceremony was publicly performed and was generally reserved for the elite. Egyptians practiced a ritual circumcision with the transformation of the boy into the man, and let him be privy to ancient mysteries. The priest performed the procedure publicly using a stone blade. Much is known about the Egyptians because they developed a formal system of writing called hieroglyphics. The hieroglyphics are characters that represent items or written things. The writings and drawings, the hieroglyphics, took a lot of time, and Egyptians even created a cursive script called Herrick, which was used for most of the writing done on ink on papyrus. The Inca had no formal system of writing. Instead, they used a method of storytelling, which the adult males of the family would teach their male children to recite the history. But history also was preserved by the use of a quipu, a knotted string device used by accountants. The quipu recorded numeric data using the decimal system to distinguish different types of data. The strings would be different colors and lengths. The type of knots along the strings signified units of 1, 10, 100, or more. All the cords hung from a main string, and their positions and color likely signified what was being counted: gold, coin, or other goods. The quipu quickly recorded all types of data, like a takeover of villages, taxes, a census of the game from the hunt, and thereby they did leave a history of their events. The mystery of the Egyptian Empire are still captivating historians and explorers alike from all around the world. Tourism is one of the most important part of Egypt's economy. At its peak in 2010, the sector employed about 12% of Egypt's workforce, serving approximately 14.7 million visitors to Egypt, according to the Rutgers Africa article in 2011. The Inca were also ingenious people whose architecture still holds a great deal of interest to people from around the world. As a result, the areas of Peru, a favorite being Machu Picchu, where the Inca structures are still standing, attract many tourists annually, boosting the economy. Tourism also provides an opportunity for the local artisans to sell their craft. The Inca are proud of their heritage and still hold a reverence for the sun as the ancients once did. Today, the most important of the Peruvian festivals is the Inti Raymi, the Festival of the Sun, which is dedicated to the sun god Inti, one of the most venerated deities in Inca religion. It is a celebration of the winter solstice. Finally, through the Human Genome Project, with scientific evidence that link all mankind together genetically, we are said to have come from one single man and one single woman in Africa. The similarities found between the Inca and the Egyptian people are due to the migration northward through Africa and then westward across the Bering Strait and into the Americas. Because the environment of the two cultures was different, each evolved as needed, based on what the environment offered. Thank you, and I hope that you have enjoyed this presentation on this comparison of ancient Egyptian and Inca cultures and civilization.